Dover Beach, written by British poet Matthew Arnold, was first published in 1867. It is considered a lyrical poem whose structure and ideas mimic that of a tide. It is divided into 4 unequal stanzas that take the reader on a journey from the speaker's external thoughts to the speaker's internal thoughts. Stanza 1 begins with the speaker looking out at the French coastline, watching the tide at night under the light of the moon. The coast is beautiful and peaceful. The sound of the ocean is soothing against the backdrop of the moon and speckles of light coming from across the channel. This natural, tranquil scene creates both visual and auditory imagery, and it's created with the help of alliteration, assonance, consonants, and other descriptive words such as calm, moon, light, and tranquil, all of which create a calming rhythm of a scene the speaker finds pleasure in looking at. Then the speaker urges someone else to come to the window to see the enchanting view, adding a bit of excitement to the scene. The speaker uses the word sweet as a metaphor to describe the night air and creates imagery again through sensations of taste. The speaker feels very strongly about this statement because the line ends with an exclamation point. But then the author's feelings change again, for the speaker notices that all is not right with the scene. In particular, at the point where the sea meets the sand and prompts the other person to listen closely to the sound of the pebbles as the waves shift them. The speaker equates the slow and repeating rhythm to feelings of sadness. Alliteration, assonance, and consonance devices help maintain a slow rhythm, but also help change the tone along with additional descriptive words like grating, roar, drawback, fling, tremulous, and sadness, all of which bring melancholy to a scene that seemed so beautiful just a few lines earlier. In stanza 2, the allusion of Sophocles hearing the same sounds of sadness on the Aegean Sea implies that human misery has existed for centuries. Given that Sophocles was a Greek playwright that wrote tragedies, it is becoming clearer that the speaker is asserting that something that is seemingly beautiful on the surface has a dark side. If that's not enough dread, the speaker reveals an even deeper meaning in stanza 3. In stanza 3, Arnold compares religious faith to the sea, thus exposing the true problem. Faith used to be full, spread around the earth, and embedded tightly like a girdle within society. Talk about imagery. But now, the speaker only hears the tide's sad withdrawal, the water receding from in between the rocks. Similarly, faith has receded, leaving the world unprotected. Darwin's theory of evolution, published in 1859, most likely created the rift in faith, given that it provided an alternative theory of creation. There has been much debate as to who the speaker is referring to in the beginning lines of stanza 4. Love could be a romantic partner, like Arnold's wife, or the idea of love itself, or even faith. Regardless of who or what love symbolizes here, the speaker evokes a sense of sentimentality for the way things used to be, like being truthful to one another because the world lies to them. The insertion of truth does provide some semblance of hope in a world that seems to be so dreary. The final line alludes to the idea of war, specifically at night. Now, let's put this line into context, shall we? Arnold's father, Thomas Arnold, an educator himself, published a translation of the history of the Peloponnesian War, written by Thucydides, probably the greatest Greek historian ever. This great war was between Athens and Sparta in the 5th century. So what are the chances that some of the dynamics of Greek warfare were ingrained in little Matthew Arnold's brain? For instance, he probably learned from his father about the challenges of war during that time period, like not knowing if one were fighting a comrade or an enemy at night. I mean, who has time to light a torch in the middle of a battle? And even if one is lit, will it make a difference at 50 feet away? Within this context, ignorant armies clashing by night makes perfect sense. This type of warfare symbolizes the idea of mistrusting the very thing one should trust. Soldiers had to fight with uncertainty under the cover of darkness. Was the person next to them their comrade or their enemy? Such decisions were easy to determine in the daytime, but darkness made such decisions confusing and frightful. But what is the deeper meaning of this line? The speaker feels uneasy about society's growing faith in science and the decline of spiritual faith. There is a mistrust in the superficial security given to science because it might be the enemy. So beware. Dover Beach is indicative of poetry of the Victorian era in that it contains elements of both romanticism and realism. Romantic elements include nature, which is presented in the setting itself, the French coastline. Emotions, and there are a lot of them, that change the tone from calm to excited, to dreary, to hopeful, to confusion. This feels a little bit like the ebb and flow of a tide, right? And it has elements of imagination by guiding the reader through an analogy of the beauty and darkness seen on the coastline to that of faith. And realism, well, if addressing a polarizing issue like moving away from faith isn't realistic, I don't know what is. The stanzas, meter, and rhyme are all irregular. The poem has 4 stanzas of varying lengths and a mixed length of iambic meter. It's all over the place, ranging from trimeter to tetrameter to pentameter. And although the poem does have rhyme, there isn't a rhyme pattern, which makes it irregular as well. Visually, the very structure of this poem mimics the ebb and flow of a tide, and the abundance of irregularity highlights the central theme of Dover Beach, which is the conflict between religious faith and science during the Victorian era. The struggle between these two opposing ideologies about the origins of the world speaks to the growing pains of becoming a dominant nation. Everything is questioned, and nothing is as it seems.